Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm PennLive opinion editor John Micek. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're talking with Gina Riordan, the program supervisor at Drug Free Workplace Pennsylvania, a state program administered through the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency that helps employers deal with addiction in the workplace. For the next 15 or 20 minutes, we'll be talking about those challenges and what employers can do when they see these problems and tackle them in the workplace. Gina, thanks for coming in this afternoon.
Thank you so much, John.
Let's start with baseline stuff. What is Drug Free Workplace PA?
It is a state grant organization that provides training to supervisors and employers, as well as families across PA, using signs and symptoms and substance use disorder education.
And this has been in place for how long now?
Currently with Gaudenzia for 4 years.
Okay. So tell me a bit about the program. What does it do? How do you access the services? If I'm an employer looking to get in touch with you, what do I need to do?
Very commonly, we have an employer that will, give us a call and say, I currently am having some issues. I think that there are employees that are using, and we have a drug-free workplace program in place, but they don't seem to be, the supervisors don't seem to be executing maybe reasonable suspicion. So the first thing we do is ask to take a look at their policy, because we do have a extensive online policy builder on our website. Again, all the services are free of charge. And make sure that their policy is thorough. Then the next step is we really begin to educate them and say, perhaps the supervisor is not walking through and using the reasonable suspicion drug testing option because they don't have signs and symptoms education. So then we recommend coming into their location and providing about a 45-minute training to supervisors. We walk through what is addiction. We do share some of the national and the state stats. And then we dive much deeper into the signs and symptoms of use, and then reasonable suspicion, how to execute even a conversation of reasonable suspicion. We even get into scripting. We also have tools that we provide the supervisors to make those that process a little bit easier, and even in some cases walk through scenarios and break it into group sessions and work on those.
I mean, you threw quite a lot out there. So let's drill down on all of that. You teach employers to recognize, I mean, it seems like addiction is fairly easy to define, but you need to teach employers what that is. What do you tell them?
One of the fastest ways that you can potentially detect use is eyes, dilation of eyes, the changes of eyes, body language, and just behaviors. And that aspect is very, very important. It can become a safety issue if you do have an individual that is using. And in some cases, I think they think, oh, well, we're not a manufacturer. We're perhaps in an office setting, so there shouldn't be issues. Well, there definitely can be issues, safety issues, as well as just morale issues.
So we're looking at signs of addiction. You mentioned dilation of the eyes, changes in body language. What kind of changes of body language? What other signs are we looking for?
If you typically have an employee that dialogues with you face-to-face, eye contact, and all of a sudden they are looking above your head or on the side or looking down, they're not giving you that eye-to-eye contact, that is definitely one of the signs of the body language. And even one of the things too that we touch on is something as simple as surface areas. A lot of employers don't even think about looking at their surface areas for perhaps substances. And once we go in and train and talk about those substance areas, their desks areas, or if it's in a manufacturer, when they sweep the floors, what are they finding? Again,
what are they finding?
Yeah, sometimes they are finding powder. They are finding cigar wrappers that they think that are perhaps just the cigar wrappers, but specifically they are substances, or materials that are being used to roll marijuana. To roll joints. So again, just trying to really walk through their whole environment and get them prepared to look in all different areas of their workplace.
What's the dollar cost to an employer in terms of addiction?
It's about $15,000 per employee.
What's the it's $15,000 per employee. What's the national cost of this?
About $500 million nationally.
So that's huge.
Yes, it is very much huge.
And you're talking about reasonable suspicion. If I'm an employer and I think somebody is using, how do you have that conversation? How do you sit down with them and say, I think you have a problem. I think you need to seek help?
One of the first things that we really begin to train on is making sure that there are 2 individuals that are documenting what is occurring, because we know best practices, that is the best approach. So that is very important, in making sure that the documentation is thorough. Then to make sure that the employee and the supervisor is in a confidential or a private setting. That is another thing that a lot of the employers, particularly in the manufacturer setting, they forget. And they may begin to have that dialogue on the floor or off to the side, and that privacy is very, very important. And 2, not to get caught up in perhaps with the employee making excuses. That is also very, very common with an employee that is actively using substances, as they are used to justifying their use. And so they can become very convincing as to what they are using. And so we, again, just remind the supervisors to stay very specific to what is occurring, to review their drug policy, and to share with them only specifically how it has impacted their work performance, and then enter into the reasonable suspicion recommendation that they're going to either provide a on-site drug test or off-site drug test, just depending on what the policy is for the company.
Excuse me, I presume there's some legal liability on the part of employers as well that they need to be aware of.
Correct. Yes, that is right. The best practices through the Department of Labor are 5 steps, and that is, the first is creating a drug-free workplace. The second is having supervisory training. The third is having employee training. The fourth is having an EAP, an employee assistance program, in place. And then the 5th is drug testing in place. So those are the 5 steps.
So before we started rolling the camera, you were mentioning to us that sometimes employers don't know what training is available to them. Could you talk a bit about that as well?
Yes, yes. Again, just kind of going back to my initial comment that employers will call, or supervisors will call, and many times it's the safety managers or the human resources, and they will say, you know, we have a policy in place, but we find that the supervisors are not really executing it, and they're not really using it. And so then again, we get into a little bit more detail as to perhaps why. It's probably because they don't even understand their own policy. They don't have that comfort level to have that conversation, and you know, we make the recommendation to come in and to begin with the supervisors to have about that 45-minute training. After that, then we do recommend at least a 20-minute training with employees, because we know for a fact that, you know, peer-to-peer conversations can work, and if in fact they know of a peer amongst them that are using, there has been cases to where that I have gone back like a 3rd time within an organization and pleasantly found out that after having that employee conversation, or that training, excuse me, that the employee took it upon themselves to encourage that peer to get help.
How many of these training sessions do you do a year to the?
Well, we have, over the course of the last 4 years, we've been in well over 1,000 employers. So, you know, there's several hundred every year. It really varies in size. That's the other thing I really would like to share, because I think some of the smaller employers just don't think that we would come out and provide those trainings. And I've provided trainings as little as 4 employees, you know, so as small as, you know, 4 employees. So it doesn't really matter the size. The other thing is we work with a lot of large organizations that have shifts. And so it's very common that we're going in at 2 a.m. and at 4 a.m. and, you know, really our goal is to be able to reach as many supervisors as we can with this training. What
are you asked the most by the people you're training, or the most surprising question you get from them?
I think them not understanding addiction. And so we spend about 7-8 minutes making sure that everyone walks away with an understanding of what is addiction.
So what is it? How do you explain it?
Well, I really go into the detail of, yes, it does begin as a moral choice, unless they have actually tried or prescribed, prescription medications. But it is typically a moral choice. But we know, based on the strength of what's out there now and the frequency, that individuals slide into, you know, the addiction fairly quickly. And it is a brain chemistry. It is a change in dopamine levels and serotonin. And if you talk to individuals that are in recovery, many of them will say to you, well, I never thought I would become an addict. I mean, I had no idea that was going to happen. It just happened so suddenly.
I think that's been the most surprising thing that I've discovered as I've been writing about this issue, is the extent to which opioids, in fact, rewire
yes, they do.
your brain in a very real way. And people sometimes just think, well, you can just quit. And it's not always that easy.
No, it is not. The number one, however, substance of choice that I hear in the workplace affecting performance is alcohol.
Okay.
So I do want to drive that home. Yes, we do have a opioid epidemic. I in no way want to discredit what's occurring and how many we are losing. But, you know, in our opinion, and many of us say in the industry, that is an addiction epidemic. You know, we have well over 20 million individuals addicted to alcohol. And alcohol, again, moderation is one thing. I want to clarify that.
Of course.
Moderation is one thing, but we're talking about individuals that are consuming to the level to where that it's affecting their job performance.
I mean, what do you think is, you're talking about an addiction epidemic, opioids, alcohol, whatever. I mean, what are the causal factors behind that? I mean, what's driving that? We hear any number of theories.
I know. I mean, I think the sheer fact of the substances being so much stronger. You know, we often say that a joint 15, 20 years ago is comparable to 15 today, so 1 to 15 ratio. So we know the fact that it's much stronger. Pennsylvania currently is outpacing every other state in the United States with overdose deaths. I don't know if you know that, but we had a 43% increase. So, and Philadelphia is the #1 import of heroin on the East Coast. And so Pennsylvania, unfortunately, is really taxed, I think, with also that challenge of just that substance being readily available. Another major issue is early onset. So what we are watching, and this topic is very near and dear to my heart because we live it as a family, you know, our children are starting to dabble with alcohol, marijuana, substances at the age of 12 and 13. You know, it used to be 17 and 18. So we know for a fact that that's about a 5-year difference with brain development.
Right.
So, you know, you talk to individuals that are in the treatment industry and that run the facilities, and they are starting to see younger and younger individuals with harder and harder uses of the drugs. And so I think it's a combination of that. I do know that, you know, there was a period of time to where there was overprescribing, but I feel like the medical community has really stepped up to the plate and done an excellent job. You know, addressing that challenge. So it's a number of things. Another thing, you know, if you read about research, there's a big uptick of depression, suicide amongst teens. You know, there is some correlation to screen time. You know, so I think it's a multitude of things. I wish I had that answer. If I did, you know, I may be working in DC. So, yeah.
But I mean, let's talk about that family thing for a minute. And, you know, we had the talk from our parents when we were teenagers about what we should do, what we shouldn't do. Has that talk changed? Are the fundamentals still the same, or are there things that we need to tell our kids now that, you know, our moms and dads wouldn't have told us 15, 20, 30 years ago, whatever? Right.
I think the substances are more readily available amongst the adolescents. There are a lot of we call them peer dealers, that are selling, you know, amongst the schools and amongst their community. And also too, even with team sports and any types of activities. We have 5 children, and so they range from 16 to 30. And, you know, I have really personally seen quite an uptick of substance use at a much younger age. So we really do recommend that parents begin to have that beginning conversations with their children really in elementary school in that 5th and 6th grade, and just talk with them about, you know, you don't take medications unless, you know, your parents provide them, but then also too, becoming a lot more open to allowing your children to share things with you. That was really something that we as parents had to go through. You know, we got through the first 3 children, and you know, our parenting seemed to be fine, but what we were catching ourselves was we were being much more too judgmental. You know, we were really shutting things down and not really allowing one of our children to be able to share what was occurring, what was going on. The other correlation to all of this that I really want to make a point is mental health. And we know for a fact that over 50% of the individuals that are suffering with substance use disorder also suffer with mental health. And so, you know, my particular, one of our children will admit that they started socially when they were younger. It was more peer pressure and socially, but then as they got a little bit older, the peer dealers were sharing with them, well, you know, you can kind of control your anxiety and your depression by using XYZ. You know, this is the healthy approach, you know, versus using prescription. And so I think the peer dealers have gotten a lot more savvier, you know, with how they're selling. And I think too, just the uptick of us recognizing mental health also has attributed, you know, to the use.
Okay. Talk a bit about treatment options. I mean, people think you go in for the 30-day thing and then that's it, but it's really not like that anymore at all.
No, no. Treatment options are, it's so individualized, definitely individualized, and obviously the first thing you want to start with is therapy. You know, seeing initially if therapy and maybe intensive outpatient is enough. I mean, if you catch the individual early enough, in some cases, you know, that does occur and that does work. But in some other cases, unfortunately, perhaps the addiction has progressed and the individual is needing inpatient. The other area that I think a lot of people forget is the aftercare too.
Right.
I work with a lot of individuals in recovery, and the one consistent message that they all have said, no matter what their substance of choice was, no matter how long they have been, you know, in addiction and really struggling with it, was the aftercare. And they may relapse 4 or 5 times, but once they got the aftercare down, once they went through their treatment, and then they recognized the importance of their group sessions, regularly going to whatever group they choose to attend, to have a sponsor, to be really living in the recovery community, had really made a difference. I mean, that was the key.
And
across the board.
Medication-assisted treatment is also an option.
Yes, it is. Oh, yes.
We wouldn't treat cancer without medication, or diabetes
Correct.
without medication. And people make an argument that this is sort of on the same order as that.
Right. Well, I mean, I personally have met individuals in recovery that is the only thing that has worked for them is MAT. You know, they have tried all the other treatment modalities and it didn't work for them. And so we are, I think, at a very good stage, you know, in this industry now, and a state that is offering all the treatment modalities. You know, we are very, very blessed that way, that Pennsylvania is very progressive.
Right.
And, you know, we could be in some of the other states that are just, you know, not ahead of, I think, ahead of what's going on. But the key is early intervention. And whether that be a supervisor, an employer, or a parent. You know, getting that individual help, and also to taking it upon themselves, particularly with parents, to educating themselves as to, you know, what is occurring, you know, why is my child going down this path? I call it peeling back the banana, you know, and there are groups such as Smart Recovery, which I really do enjoy and think it's a great option for group, and that's what they focus on, is they really try to get their participants to understand, why are they using? You know, is it because they are not fitting in with a peer group, or, you know, they are very unhappy perhaps in their job or in their marriage? You know, really focusing on why are they choosing to use? Yeah.
One last thing, if people want to find you,
yes.
Where do they look?
It would be, I would encourage you to check out our website first at www.drugfreeworkplace.org. That would give you an opportunity to take a look at our policy builder. And then a list of all of the trainings. We currently offer 9 different trainings, one of which actually is DOT, meets DOT standards, which is the supervisory training that the DOT is now requiring. But we also have online trainings, and that is an area that we are currently ramping up more and more. We're having a lot of requests from our previous clients saying, you know, this has been really great stuff, but when we bring new employees on, you know, could we in fact go online? So we are really focusing right now on our online training and trying to ramp that up.
Great. All right. Gina Riordan, thanks very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, everybody.